morning, everybody. About a month and a half ago, Pastor Mike called me and said, hey, I got to ask you something. And I was thinking about maintenance. Okay, what do you need now, Mike? What else do you need? He says, I need you to do me a favor. Would you mind doing a Sunday service? And I paused for a minute. Yeah, sure, Mike, I'll do it for you. And as the time got closer, I began to panic a little bit. But, I think God put something in my heart to give to you. I think it's just something that we don't talk much about. But I think it's something that there's just so much information to give you. I don't know if I can give it all to you today. We'd be here for 2-3 hours. But, when we talk about Joseph, we grow up in the church and we hear about Joseph a lot. We think about his coats of many colors. You're taught at a little age who Joseph is. But do we really know who Joseph was? And that's kind of where the title came from. Who is the man we call Joseph? Who really was he? What kind of person was he? And if you look through his scriptures and you read about him, everywhere he went, he was looked at differently and he was put in a high position from somebody. They left him in charge of something. They put him over something. And you begin to ask, what made him so different? Why was he that way? We hear of all the great things Joseph did in kind of his life that he went through. Well, let's read this. Genesis, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, just 2 through 6. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did. He served in the home of the Egyptian master, Potiphar. Potiphar noticed this, and he realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success at everything he did. He pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph a personal attendant, and he put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and his property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake, and all his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and his livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. While Joseph was there, he didn't worry about a thing except what food to eat. And if you read down just a little bit further, remember after Joseph was accused of raping Potiphar's wife, I guess you want to say, you go all the way to the bottom of the story of Genesis 39. Remember, the master of the prison put Joseph in charge of the prison. And it's the same story at the very end. The warden had no worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. 2 different people put Joseph in charge of something very important. So why was this? Why was Joseph put in these positions? Sure, we know that God was with him. But you have to ask yourself this question. What made Joseph so unique? And the first question I ask myself is, what were his core values? When we talk about core values, we all have different ones. And that's what I really want to focus on today. What are our core values compared to Joseph? Let's talk about Joseph. And as I read through his story, not just chapter 39, but through his life, I began to jot down some things about what was Joseph's core values. What made him so different than me? What made him so different than all the other people that worked for Potiphar? What made him so different that the Egyptian king allowed him to rule all of Egypt? What made him so different? And it was his core values, what he stood by. I wrote down some things that I thought were pretty neat about Joseph. And I want to kind of look at those things for a minute and see what made him so different. One of the things that I found out real quick, that he was very principled. He was disciplined in his life. He was very disciplined. Integrity and character were very high on his list. Very, very important to him. He was very disciplined and principled in his life. He knew what was right, and he stood by what he knew was right. And he didn't waver. Very principled. I wrote this quote down. If you want to write it down, it's a pretty good quote. It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. See, Joseph knew exactly what his values were. If you think about what happened to him, here's a beautiful lady throwing herself at him. In today's generation, most guys would jump at that opportunity, unfortunately. But Joseph said, no way, I cannot do that to my master. I would not do that to him. I'm not going to disgrace him by doing this. This is wrong. He was stood by his principles. He stood by what he believed in. And later on, even though, and we'll talk about this in a minute, when he went through difficult circumstances, he did not waver. He said, no way, this is not right. I'm not doing this. The other thing that I found so interesting about Joseph, he was so humble. The man was a humble man. Think about it. He was left in charge of Potiphar's home, and Potiphar was right under the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So he's put in a high position, and he came out of slavery. He could have been very, what's that word I'm looking for? Haughty. But he wasn't. He was very humble. And even when he was put in charge of all of Egypt, a very humble man. He wasn't haughty. You see, in today's generation, not many people have humbleness on their core values. We don't see a lot of that in today's generation. I don't think people even know what humbleness is, to be honest with you. I heard a story, and this kind of classifies this. Two billy goats were walking on a path, very narrow path. On the edge was a high, steep cliff they could not go up. On the other side was a 300-foot drop. And as they began to walk towards each other, they stopped and looked at each other. There was no room for them to go on each side of each other. And they paused there for a moment. What are we going to do? We can't pass each other. One of us will fall off the cliff. We can't go up the mountain. It's too high. So one of the goats decided that he would lay down, let the other goat walk over him. The other one got up and walked and went their ways. That's what humbleness is. When we sacrifice ourselves for other people, and we don't take credit for it. Joseph didn't look for credit. Joseph didn't look for approval. Joseph did what he thought was right. And he wanted the best for everybody. He was a humble man. The other thing that I thought was interesting about Joseph, he was so disciplined. He saw the long-term perspective of his life. He saw what was right in the long term. He did not waver. The other thing I thought was really interesting was his loyalty. Loyalty to Potiphar, loyalty to the master of the jail, loyalty to the king of Egypt. Very loyal. He stood by them. Even though things could have been really bad for him, even though things didn't go real well for him, he was loyal to his master, to his leaders. You know, I think about our society today. People aren't loyal to each other anymore. Some of these core values have been lost. And we're going to get into some of those things in a minute, but the last one I want to talk about was about Joseph anyway, was his faithfulness. He gave his very, very best at whatever was presented to him. Whether it was the Potiphar's overseer of his house, whether it was in the jail, whether it was for the king of Egypt, he gave his very, very best. His commitment to God was unwavering. He was completely faithful to his calling. It's interesting because, you know, on number 2 of our overhead there, did his values change in difficult circumstances? As I read through Joseph's life, I never saw anywhere where he never wavered when things didn't go his way. He never changed his core values when things didn't go his way. Think about our lives for a moment. When we go through things in life, do our values change? Honesty, something that Joseph held real high on his standards. We always have opportunities to do something that nobody's going to see and nobody might know. We all have those opportunities. The big question is, do we do what is right? Especially in difficult circumstances. Joseph didn't waver. Even when things got tough. I'm sure he probably could have walked away from God saying, here I am, doing exactly what God wanted me to do, and I get accused of something I never, ever did, and now I'm going to prison, and this is the God I serve? Do you don't think he had those questions going through his mind? Have you ever had something done to you that was wrong? You say, wait, I didn't even do that, and I'm getting punished for something I never did? And do we start to question God? I'm sure that went through Joseph's mind, but he never wavered. He never stopped serving God. He never stopped believing who God was. And if you look at point 3 there, point 3a, doing the right thing doesn't always produce a fair outcome. Sometimes in life, when we do the very right thing, things don't always come out the way we planned it. I have battled with this story for a couple weeks now, and I got permission before I tell the story. And I witnessed something in my life to somebody that went through exactly what Joseph went through. This young lady was very close to her father growing up. Did everything with her dad. So close to her father, her sisters became jealous and thought she was the favorite one. Oh, Dad favors you. Dad gives you everything. Dad gives you everything you want. Everything that Dad does for you is for you. And she grew up that way. And there was a little bit of hostility there from her sisters towards her. And as she grew older, still close to her dad, this young lady became pregnant. Her dad's a pastor. Dad never looked down on her, brought alongside her, said it's okay, we make mistakes. Still very close. This young lady had 3 children, and every single one of those children loved their grandfather tremendously. Loved him to death because they were her children. Sisters didn't like that very much. Years went by. She worked in the ministry with her dad. Dedicated her life to the ministry. Gave her life to that church. Gave everything she had to make her father's church the best church it could possibly be. She loved her dad tremendously. And slowly, all these things started to turn. Sisters became resentful towards her. They put a happy face on, but you knew there was always that resentment towards her. And at a time, same thing with Joseph. Her entire family, her dad, her mom, and all her sisters, turned her back on her and tossed her aside. And I witnessed this personally because of my wife. I saw what they did to her. And I remember the story of Joseph. But you know what's so incredible? This woman never, ever blamed God. Never said, I'm not going to serve this godly man. She did just like Joseph. She was on her knees nightly praying. Praying for her family. Praying for everything that she knew was right. She didn't hold anger. I did. I saw this happen. She said, you can't be angry. You can't hold this. It's going to rob our blessings. She taught me so much through a difficult time. When I should have been comforting her, she was doing it to me. For 3 years, this happened. Painful to watch. And you know, slowly, just like the story of Joseph, they started coming back. And now they're back in their life again. There was a few sorries here and there. But the bottom line is, she never wavered from what she believed was right. And she still loved them, still prayed for them. That taught me a whole lot about what her character is all about. Taught me a lot. Because I was angry. I was resentful. I was bitter. So how could you do that to somebody like that, especially your family? And they may see this, I don't know. But the reality is, I think through this, she not only taught myself something, which we're going to get down here a little bit later, is, let's go, is there part B up there? I'm going to jump to that where, well, I'll go, it's on C, but we'll go back to that. I'll bring this up again. But Can you jump to number C for me, please, Darren? I know I'm going out of order, but where do we develop our core values? A lot of where we develop our core values is from home, how you're raised. And you know who else saw what she went through besides me? Was her children. And they were just devastated because they were so close to their grandfather. And when they saw this happen, they said, I don't want to go to church anymore. That's what church is? Her response always was, this is not what church is about. That's what people do. God is different. Everything was encouraging. Everything was encouraging. Everything was encouraging. And those young men grew up knowing that, you know what? We can't put our trust in people because they're going to hurt us. We have to put our trust in God. And that prayer today is still the same prayer. I've heard stories like that, but I witnessed it myself. And there's a whole lot more to that story, but we don't have time for all that. But we can go back to letter B, I guess. Thank you, Darren. How do we compare our core values with Joseph? Everybody has different core values. Your values are different than my values. Your values are what matter to you most. One of my core values is hardworking. Where did I learn that from? My mom. My mom was a hard worker. She worked very, very hard. This is the one thing that I think we all have to understand. We are identified or classified by other people based on our core values. When somebody comes to me and say, hey, what about this person doing this job? What about this person coaching? Or how about this person? You've been in that life before. You know what I'm talking about. The first thing that comes to me is, what kind of person are they? And if I think about a good core value, they're a great choice. But there's a flip side to it. I don't know if I should trust that person because you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about. Think about our lives. When someone says, hey, what about Brad teaching church? I'm sure that was brought up by Mike. Someone said, I don't know about Brad. I don't know that guy. He's something else. I don't know about him. But hopefully they saw something that was a good core value. They saw something different. And that's how we need to see our lives daily. How do people view us? Because that's how we're identified. Do we want to be identified as a person of faith, a person of integrity, a person of good character, a person of honesty? Or do we want to be labeled as something differently? I don't know. They're not very honest. They're not very trustworthy. I don't know if I'd hire that person to get very flaky. How are we identified? Where are our core values at? And we have to ask ourselves that daily. Because what matters to you most are what your core values are. And that should be something you say every day. What matters to me most is what my values are. Growing up when you're young, money's everything. That's your core value. I got to make as much money as I possibly can. I got to have a savings. As you get older, money's not that important anymore. Family's more important. Being around people that you love is more important. Because there's another point up there. I'm jumping all over the place. I'm sorry, but I don't ever follow my notes all the way. But do our values change? We'll talk about that in a minute. But, yeah, there you go. Number 2 of that one. Do our core values change over the years? Sure they do. I think Joseph, as Pastor Mike shared last week, when he's very young, he had a little bit of a haughtiness towards him, a little ego towards him, because Daddy liked him and he was telling his brother stuff. And as he grew older, I think his values began to change a little bit more. I think he began to realize and understand that he needs to be a little bit more humble. Because I don't think at his early age, Joseph was very humble. But as you grow older, the position you put in, he was forced to be humbled. We can go back now, Darren. Thank you. Labels are placed on us to describe our character. And we have to know that. We have to accept that. And the question that I have to ask myself and ask you is, what labels do we live by? How do people view our characters? And the biggest question is, do people even know our core values? Not by you telling them, but by how you live your life. When we go through Joseph, we discover that really quick. if you read through there, you can know his core values. You know what he was doing. You know exactly what he was all about. Do people know who we are through our core values? Just by we live our life? So let's go back to letter C now, Darren. I'm sorry. And there's one I didn't put up there. Values are essential for effective leadership and witnessing. This topic that Pastor Mike is going over is witnessing to the world. The things that we live by are what people see. Our children, our grandchildren, and our parents. And I'll go back to number one. Core values are learned at an early age. Do our core values early? But I want to go back to number one. Yeah, they're learned at an early age. But core values are also developed on who we surround ourselves with, who we associate with. If we're around people that have good, solid core values with honesty and integrity, hardworking, whatever they are, that's who we're going to become. But if we're around people that are scandalous, they cheat, they lie, they steal, how do you think our value is going to be? And those are values that are passed on to our kids. You know, we were talking about this the other day. We were driving somewhere far, and it's a long way, and we talked about a lot of things. But I said, you know, what's really interesting is people raise their kids with very bad values. And those kids grow up with the same anger and resentment towards people because that's what they were raised by. They were told that. Our world is filled with so much hate and resentment towards each other. The race thing is ridiculous, stupid, but where's all that coming from? And I don't want to get in politics, but it's all caused by what is told at the home. It's how that child is raised. So their values aren't trustworthiness, faithfulness, truthfulness. Their values are being hateful and resentful. And we look around and we see all the hate in this world, and we begin to realize it all comes because those core values weren't installed at home by your children. And our job never stops. My job didn't stop when my kids got older. They still look to me and see how I live my life. One of the greatest compliments I guess I could ever had was my son came home one day. He said, hey, Dad, I got called in the office today. He said, when he called me, I panicked. I thought I was really in trouble. I said, what happened? He goes, well, my boss called me in and said, sit down, and says, you know what? You're not in trouble, but I want to give you a raise. I've never done this in 25 years, but I want to give you a raise. He goes, why? He goes, because I've never seen a young man work as hard as you do. Where did you get your work ethic from? He says, yeah, honestly, my dad taught me that. Growing up, he might got 50-cent raise an hour. Never did it in 25 years. Had to go through corporate to get approval and everything, was what I was told. And I thought, wow. And I learned that from my mom. She's telling me, you're never going to get anything in life for free. You need to work for everything you get. And that's how I did it. And somehow along the road, my children saw that. And they began to do the same thing. And it was rewarding. A great compliment. Not from me, but know that God blessed him through life. Core values. Establishing those in your lives. Your children watch everything you do, parents. Grandparents, your grandson and daughters look at what you do. They want to see how you take care of grandma. How you love them. How you care for them. They're looking at those same core values as you taught your children. People in society look at our core values. When I worked in the world, I worked at an aerospace industry for about 10 years. I started working there when I was probably 21, 22 years old. And I worked there for about 10 years. And yeah, I had my Christian life. And you know, when you work in the world, there's a lot of people. And we worked in aerospace, and we built the main rotor blade for the helicopters. And it was a pretty cool job, but you're around a lot of bad environment. And your faith has to be strong. And they tempt you daily. They try to tease you and everything. And I just stood strong. And when they asked Christian questions, I would answer it. I wouldn't go any further. I would just answer his question. And as time went on, this was over a course of 2 years, the questions started becoming more frequent and more frequent and more frequent. Ask you more and more detail. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And I'd give him what he asked, and that was as far as I went. After 2 years, we come in the morning. I'll never forget this day. He says, hey, come here. I got to tell you something. What's up? He goes, I got saved last night. He goes, and not only did I get saved, I'm going to start working in children's ministry. And he says, you know, my brother's a pastor, but I didn't get saved because of him. Because I watched you for 2 years to see how your character was. And everything you said, and did you live your life the way you said you lived your life? And you did, and that changed my life. That's witnessing. That's people watch us. They're seeing what we do. And you know, last time I talked to him, he was still in the ministry, still working in ministry, at children's ministry, living a spiritual life. And that was some 10 years later. So that was awesome to hear. People watch us. They watch our character, and they see who we are. And what kind of representation are we of God when people see that? Values are so essential to effective living. I want to give you a few things and close out here pretty quick. What values do you see driving your behavior? Those are questions you can ask yourself. It's not on the screen there, but what values do you see driving your behavior? We hold certain values, but our actions are not governed by the things we say we hold dear to our hearts. That's another key right here. We cannot have a set of values at home. We can't have a set of values at work. And we can't have a set of values at Christian activities or church activities. And many people do. Ask kids in your classroom that you teach. My parents don't act like that at home. They're totally different. I've been in the classroom. I hear those things. Not to judge. But they'll tell you that. We know that. We can't have different set of values for home, at work, at play, at church. People see those things. And who sees them the most? Our family. Why are values so essential? I guess you can go to letter D, yeah. Our godly values are what the world is attracted to. I'm not sure why Potiphar's wife was so gravitated to Joseph. The Bible says he was very handsome, very well built. Maybe that was it. But I don't know if you've ever gravitated to somebody that just had something different. It's like, man, that person there's something really different about them. They're just so unique, so different. Then you find out, wow, their values, their Christian morals are so awesome. I've met people that way. I've talked to them, and I'd come home and say, man, that guy's incredible. I love that guy. What's so different about him? And I realized when I began to get to know him a little bit more, the values he holds, the integrity he holds behind him. Those are the people I want to be around. And I look around this room, there's people out here that I have highly, highly, highly respect for. It's because I've seen the way they live their lives. I think they're great people. And I respect them tremendously. And I'm not here today because Mike just asked me. I'm here because I have a high respect for Pastor Mike and what he stands for. And I know his core values. I know what he's like. And over the past, 6 or 7 years, we really got to know each other a lot better. But if I didn't have that high respect for him, I wouldn't be at this church. And I wouldn't be on this pulpit. I'm sure that's why you guys are here, because you see the values he holds in his life, especially those that are really close to him. Why are values so important? Values are uncompromisable. They're uncompromisable. You could fake love to somebody. You can pretend you love somebody. You can pretend to be compassionate for somebody. But there's some values you can't pretend. Because people's going to read right through you. Values for effective leadership is a truth that drives and directs our behavior. When we have strong values in our life, it's going to direct the way we live our lives. Those standards we live by. When there's something in question, I don't know if I should do this. This may not be right. But you know what? Nobody's going to know. It's going to benefit me. I got to lie on my taxes just a little bit. No big deal. Nobody's going to know. They're not going to audit me. But those guidelines help you stay on the right path. I mean, we have a tax person that's a Christian lady. And we got to bring all our paperwork there because she knows, I don't lie. Hey, this is what it is. And whatever comes out, it comes out. If I got to pay. If I don't, I don't. Okay, great. But the fact is, it's the way it is. And sometimes we have to be truthful no matter what the outcome is. No matter what the outcome is. Values are the motivational tool given us the reason why we do the things we do. I'll say that again. Values are the motivational tool giving us the reason why we do the things we do. My son asks me sometimes, why do you do so much for the church and the school? You're killing yourself. You're not young anymore. And my answer to that is, it's just who I am. It's just what I do. It's who I am. Why do you keep coaching when these kids today don't want to perform and are disrespectful? That's just who I am. Why do you keep loving your family after they treated you like they did? That's just who I am. I'm a loving person. I love people. That's who I am. That should be the answer when we do things. Why do you keep doing the things you do? Because that is just who we are. And that's how we should live our lives. I like this one a lot. Values place boundaries around our behavior. They let us go so far. Okay, that's where I got to stop because my values don't let me go any further than that. I'm sure Joseph had many times in his life when he could have gone a different direction, but he knew he can only go so far. It's like one of those fences you put up. You see the wire there, but if your dog gets too close to it, it shocks him. It's kind of that way. You know, we get too close to that, and God shocks us, okay, you've gone too far now. That's why we need to establish some core values in our life. We know our boundaries. We know how far we can go. And the last one, values provide direction and guidance in spite of our emotions. I want to say that one more time. Values provide direction and guidance in spite of our emotions. We can't live based on our emotions because it feels good, let's just do it. That's how our world lives today. It feels good, let's do it. We'll deal with the consequences later. We'll sin now and ask for forgiveness later. That's our world now because it felt good at the time. No. Values give us guidance in spite of our emotions. We cannot live our lives based on our emotions. We got to have some core values in our life. I mean, I think about Joseph, and I think about if I was put in a position when a lady was throwing herself at me, how would I respond? How did he respond? Did he even have a notion? Okay, maybe this won't be such a bad thing. Nobody's going to find out. Or he said, oh, no, there's no way. I mean, he didn't even think about it. He turned and walked away and ran. And the Bible says he ran away, and she pulled his cloak off him, and then she said, he raped her. Joseph had an incredible life. And we begin to understand who he really was. It really takes hold in our lives. What values do we hold closest in our lives? What are our core values? I can't tell you what your core values are. I can't tell you exactly how to live your life, only you can do that. But just remember this, your core values are what are most important to you. If honesty is on your list, that's going to be your core value. Loving people, that's my wife. One of her core values is loving people. No matter how dirty they are or how bad they smell, she loves them. Wants to feed everybody. People break down in front of our house. Take them out some water. They're hot, they're thirsty. You don't know these people. Take them some water. People riding down the street, and he had a bike the other day, and his bag tore, and all the bottles and cans were all over the street. We're going to have to go help him. Are you kidding me? And there I go with a couple bags. Let me help you pick up your cans and bottles. It's just caring for people. That's just who she is. It's one of her core values, taking care of people. I can't take that from her. That is, she will never deviate from that. Never. She will never, ever deviate from caring for people. One of her lifelong dreams is to open a retirement home for the elderly and care for them. That's her vision. Caring for people. Loving people. That's her core value. That was installed in her by her parents. Her grandparents. They love people. They care for people. What's your core values? Whatever they are, live by them.